It's July 4th, and here we sit. We're here on the ragged edge of crisis. This is a world crisis, and needless to say, it's a national crisis. It's a worldwide breakdown crisis that invests really all aspects of life. And that is why it's important to situate ourselves in the long view of history. And we've got a good show today. This is the July 4th Independence Day show. And we're going to be talking about some good things. But first, let's have a little of Politics by Jake's Truth Social, so to speak. Why don't we do that? Why don't we open the show with that? Let's have some observations. Now, Donald Trump, see, this guy, he has a diseased mind. He says he's been treated so unfairly. It's part of his malignant narcissism. It's a part of his justification for doing the things that he does. And he has frontotemporal lobe dementia. And this causes this is the frontotemporal lobes right here. This is what they call the temple. This is supposedly where the soul is. And never mind that, but it's shrinking. That's what frontotemporal lobe dementia, that's one of the aspects of it. It shrinks. And it changes your behavior. And he already has malignant narcissism. He's been diagnosed by that. And since at least 1973, as far as I can tell, and this is when his father was sued, it's been a part of his justification for doing the things that he does because, and you've heard it, haven't you? He's been treated so unfairly. And when you look at this, I mean, yeah, the credulous, the easily led, they'll buy this right away. And why? Because it's part of Donald Trump's playbook. Because they actually have been treated unfairly. And who would know better than a penny-pinching, nickel-nursing Queens landlord who was taught by his father that all of these people out there were suckers and marks who were to be taken. But Donald Trump hasn't been treated unfairly. He took what is essentially a rape case, okay? He took what is essentially a rape case, and he took it all the way to the Supreme Court. And it was a civil case, but the judge has stated that if these facts were brought before a jury in a criminal case, it would be called rape. And so I feel comfortable with that judicial authority, and I'm going to go with that. I'm not going to bandy about the phrase sexual assault. He's a rapist, and the court has said so. And he took it all the way to the Supreme Court because he didn't want to pay. And you know what the Supreme Court just did? They just did this past few days. They told him to go pound sand. They told him to pay up. And in parentheses, they might have said, you sleazy, no good so-and-so. And that's something coming from a corrupt court, which they are. Coming from a 6-3 supermajority, which, you know, Donald Trump put a lot of these justices there, and they owe their position to him. So it's a 6-3 supermajority. They owe their positions to him, not all of them, but some of them. And they told him to go pound sand anyway. He wanted another thing. He wanted to violate the 14th Amendment. The jus soli. And when I say jus soli, that's Latin. That's ius, and it's pronounced jus. Because the Romans, they didn't, in their alphabet, they didn't have a J. They had an I, but they didn't have a J. So the jus soli, S-O-L-I, the law of the soil. This is a part of the new birth of freedom. That's what the Civil War was about. I mean, that's what tens of thousands of Union soldiers died for, and among them, upwards of 200 African Americans who joined them. And these people earned their citizenship. And they didn't even have to earn it, you know? You know why? Because it is a well-known principle. If you don't believe me, just go to Blackstone's commentaries. That rights precede government. That is fundamental. In other words, we don't have our rights. You viewers and listeners who are listening to me in the Tri-County area and all over the country, really. We actually have some people in the world who are listening too. If you're in the United States, you don't have your rights because of the United States government. And if you live anywhere else, you don't have your rights because of the government. The rights are inalienable. That's in the Constitution. And what that means is that they existed before we were born. They exist upon our being born. They exist thereafter. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether a government says they exist or not. They're inalienable. They can't be removed. And they can't be modified. And they can't be compromised. And they can't be taken away. All of those, certainly people like Donald Trump and Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, and all the billionaires who said, we're all in for Trump in 2024 at Davos, Switzerland in January, they would certainly like to do that. These billionaires who, at least some of them, cleave to the doctrines of eugenics. They love to talk about life unworthy of life. Long disproven. The doctrine that the Nazis embraced. You could get, at their colleges and universities, you could get a doctorate in eugenics. And actually, so far as I could tell, it actually, and somebody check me out in the audience on this if you want, it originated in the United States. It found fodder in the United States. I know that William Harvey Kellogg, whose cornflakes and other breakfast cereals you likely eat, I know I do. I love Sugar Frosted Flakes. It's one of my favorite cereals. He believed that, and he established a sanitarium partly based on those principles. So the African Americans, getting back to the point, they didn't have to earn their rights. They were free all along. But this government imposed chattel slavery upon them and made them earn their rights because it says you're slaved. You could never be a citizen. And guess what? They earned it. They earned it. And you could argue, you could very much argue that winning the Civil War would have been much harder without those upwards of 200,000. 200,000. Count them. 200,000. More than 200,000. If we had them, which fortunately we did, the war would have been much harder to win without them. And those are the people who are behind this. And I'm talking about those billionaires. And those are the people who want to take away the rights of the people born in the United States at this moment. It doesn't matter. If you're born on the soil of the United States, remember, that's the jus soli, the law of the soul. Or, pardon me, interrupted my flow here. The law of the soil. They're born on the soil of the United States. They're under the jurisdiction of the United States. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to destroy that. That's one of the Reconstruction Amendments. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are what came out of all that death, all that carnage, all that misery, all that trampling out of the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. That is the new birth of freedom. And these billionaires and these oligarchs and these rich men were all in for Trump. And you know who's behind it? You know Donald Trump is behind it. But it's not only Donald Trump, like I say, but the same billionaires, the same oligarchs, the same corporate heads, the same palace courtiers, the same people who cleave and hold the coat of Donald Trump as he does these things, because there's more people behind this than Donald Trump. Donald Trump wants to be a king, thinks he's a king, thinks that nobody can oppose him. This is obviously not true. You don't think that Jamie Dimon, when he said that in January of 2024 in Davos, Switzerland, you don't think that all those billionaires and he knew what Donald Trump was? They know what he is, that he's just a puppet. They knew that he longs to be like them, that he's got an inferiority complex. They knew that he was a poor little rich boy. They knew that they could use him to get what they wanted. And what they have always wanted, the corporate and oligarchic capture of the United States. And everything you're seeing now by this administration, and it didn't start with this administration, but everything you're seeing now are attempts to do exactly that. And may I say, they are proceeding apace. They are moving as fast as they possibly can. And so I do not say, listen to what Jake says and believe it. Take it to the bank, although I could. But what do I say? Open a space in your mind, will you? Even if it's a small space, that what I'm saying might be true. And do your own research. Don't take my word for it. Find out whether Jake is right or not. And you know, you will. You will find out. But do it, because you're a citizen. This is the United States, and today is the celebration of the country, the weekend actually, but today is the day, July 4th, of the country that gave you citizenship. And we should all educate ourselves, because education is the way to be better citizens. We need to all get active. It's either get active or get radioactive. Look, all of you maggots, all of you people who think that Donald Trump is the answer to all this, all of you people who think that Donald Trump was sent by God, and they know that you're out there, all of you people who think that he's the the hand of God, you think he's a prophet of God, some of you think he's Jesus Christ, some of you think he's the second coming of Jesus Christ. This is a poor little rich boy who took a $413 million inheritance. $413 million. And he squandered it on businesses that all failed. Trump Vodka, Trump Steaks, the Trump Enterprises, Trump University, Trump this, Trump that. They all failed. And as I said, he's a rapist. Even his own Supreme Court wouldn't let him off the hook on that. He tried to subvert the new birth of freedom, the 14th Amendment, used solely in his supermajority corrupt court, admittedly corrupt court. They're absolutely, positively corrupt. Don't get me started on that. Oh, my goodness. Wouldn't let him off the hook. Wouldn't give him that. Not even they would give him that. So don't say that this country is done. Don't say that it's ended. We'll continue with that. I felt like I needed to stick that in there right now. You say America is not great? It withstood immense corruption. And it is right now withstanding immense corruption. And what you've got to understand, what I said, this Donald Trump is a 34-time felon. And I ask you, okay, especially you maggots, but all of you, because it beggars credulity. It beggars reason. Does it not? Do you think that somehow the courts were all wrong when it convicted him 34 times of the felony of falsifying business record? Not once, not twice, not 5 times, Not 10 times, but 34 times? Do you think Donald Trump is right and everybody else is wrong? Is that what you really think? If you think this, I say guess again. I spent 30 years in the legal and judicial, the legal system, and of course interacted with the judicial system by dint of the fact that I was in the legal system. And there is an academic, I can tell you, having been through school, there is an academic and intellectual rigor that you must bring before the courts. And yeah, it's true. I have said, some of you have heard me say, that sometimes I wonder where this attorney or that attorney got his bar license. And I say, I say out of a Cracker Jacks box, because that's what it seems like. But I'm telling you, there's an academic and intellectual rigor there, and that I was subjected to and that I had to conform to in my own training, that makes such an allegation highly unlikely. Not impossible, because of course there's Eileen Cannon down in Florida, who is a Trump stooge who compromised her federal judgeship forever, and there's a black stain on her forever. She did everything she could to oppose Jack Smith's rightful prosecution of Donald Trump, every nonsensical way that she could think of. But that rigor still exists, I guarantee. And just because you have an aberration, and like I said, Donald Trump is an aberration, and what's going on is an aberration, I guarantee you that exists. And that the judges don't, I guarantee you, the judges don't put up with that nonsense. So when the Supreme Court says, in effect, you're a rapist, dude, pay the woman, he isn't being treated unfairly. He's getting exactly what he deserves. And when he stands convicted of 34 felonies, as he has been, he isn't being mistreated. He's being called exactly what it is that he is. And the trick of this is that these people and Jamie Dimon and these other oligarchs, because this is what's going on, the capture of the United States. It's what they've always wanted. These are the people who say, make America great again. These are the people who have continually mistreated you and treated you and looked upon you as shills, or I'm sorry, not shills, but marks in order to con and to fleece. These are the people who wear the red hats. You think Donald Trump is not one of them? And you think that he's going to help you? Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. He is like them and he wants to be them. And the billionaires have basically come out, as I said at the beginning of the show, and declared that they are all in for him. Why is it that you think that such people have interests that are in any way, shape, or form the same as yours? Why? So that's why I say I'll be talking about, Trump is an aberration. This administration is an aberration and nothing more. And this is Politics by Jake.
This is Politics by Jake. Most commentators merely report events. Jake decodes and reveals the hidden systems beneath the headlines. He exposes the enduring, sometimes generational patterns that govern history, politics, economics, and human behavior. Jake names the unnamed. He brings into focus the things that were hiding, sometimes even in plain sight. And now, here's Jake. More of Politics by Jake after this.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake.
And now, Politics by Jake continues.
All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. And welcome to the July 4th Independence Day show. Happy Independence Day. I hope you guys are all having a great time. Now, on Politics by Jake, what I do is I break down political and economic realities so you can understand what's going on and protect yourselves properly. If you want this kind of analysis in your lives, in your personal, financial, or your personal business lives, I do offer one-on-one strategy sessions. The link is in the description, and you can contact me. We'll be glad to talk to you. I look forward to it. All right. Now, this is July 4th. This is Independence Day, and I want to talk about this. I want to tell you what I think. We're a Western civilization here. If you want to go back to the founding of the city of Rome, you get almost 3,000 years, not quite. So don't be impressed by somebody who says they have an ancient culture, like the Iranians, for example, that goes back 2,500 years. That's fine. If it does, it does. But in the West, I think it's going to turn out to be superior if you look at it. Not that it will be superior, but it already is superior. And if you look at it, I think that's what you'll find. So that's my approach here at Politics by Jake. And of course, we're here on the ragged edge of crisis, needless to say, a worldwide breakdown crisis that invests really all aspects of life. But I would point out to you that the work is not done. July 4th is not the end of the Revolutionary War. It's really, when you think about it, when I think about it, it's sort of kind of in the early to middle part of it. If you can remember that it starts in 1775, right? Lexington Concord, the 18th of April, 75. Hardly a man's now alive who remembers that famous day and year. Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. You remember all of that stuff. Actually, this is interesting. It started before this in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. This is the earliest I have. You can call into the show and say, hey, Jake, I know something that's even earlier than this. But August 15th, 1774, actually became the first location in the Western Hemisphere to expel the British garrison that was there of two redcoats and one judge. That was the garrison, two redcoats and one judge. Whatever it was, that was the first. There's a place on the coast of Massachusetts that does try to claim primacy in this regard, but they did it only as a petition. And I say, no, you're asking for your rights. You're not asking for your rights. That's not how it works. You're asserting your rights. And that's where Great Barrington comes in. And that's why I call out Great Barrington and say hi to my listeners in Great Barrington. And we want to devote probably the second half of this program to this question of the American Revolution. The United States, the framework of the evolution of Western civilization, right? Going back to the ancient world, right? Greco-Roman antiquity, to be sure. So it's got to be a matter of ideals, of loyalties, of the purpose of life, and the really big issues. These are the ones that govern the sphere of warfare. That's the achievement of NATO, Article 5. This is one of the crowning achievements of Western civilization, and don't you dare meddle with it. I say to Donald Trump, and I say to all, and it would be good to get a statement from people in Congress. Don't mess with NATO. Article 5, which would be, of course, illegal because, when treaties are ratified, pacta sunt servanda, old Roman adage, treaties must be honored, pacta sunt servanda. And this one was 1949, the North Atlantic Pact. They say it has become part of the public laws of the United States. The media say the conservative majority, and I say, wait a minute. What is this conservative majority you're talking about? Who are these guys that you're talking about? Do words have meaning or not? Conservative means you want to conserve something. You want to keep it. You want to preserve it. It means that you respect precedent above in all courts. Precedent. If you're even a legal positivist, you should be able to understand that. Precedent, custom, tradition, norms, conventions, the established ways of doing things. The Romans called it the mos maiorum. Customs are our forefathers. The ways of the elders, the ancient ways. That's what mos maiorum means. The Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Gettysburg Address, and so forth. That's, if you're a conservative, that's what it means to be a conservative. So these people who have taken control of the government, these people are not conservatives. These are people who trample precedent every day of their lives. What did I say earlier in the show? They're doing everything they can, and it is proceeding apace. That means it is moving along as quickly as possible. These are right-wing radicals. They're right-wing radical extremists, right-wing radical reactionaries. And of course, if they cross the line into violence, if you're a right-wing radical, an extremist reactionary, you cross that line into violence, you're a fascist. So that seems to be what we're dealing with here. July 4th, the glorious 4th, the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States, at least the Declaration of Independence. And this is Philadelphia, and this is the 250th anniversary, and it's worth celebrating. Yes, we're in an aberration. Yes, we're in a crisis, but it's absolutely worth celebrating. The heart of the message that I would like to send forth in this bank and in this shoal of time is to be proud of your country. Be proud of the United States of America. You have every reason to be proud. You have no reason whatsoever to be ashamed of this process as a whole. And it is a process. It can stand comparison. It can stand comparison with anything achieved by human wit or courage or human agency ever in world history. It will stand comparison. You don't need to be ashamed. And if the forces that want you to be ashamed, I would say, are largely these perverted postmodernists. I haven't really talked to you about postmodernists much, but I should. I've got a segment, but this is July 4th. We'll talk about postmodernists soon, but not now. And I would say that these are largely these perverted postmodernists who are acting simply out of pessimism, negativity, and a completely erroneous view of world history. National pride, in the modern world, one's sense of personal identity cannot be reduced simply to religion in most cases. But for the vast majority of people, It has a lot to do with your nation, your country, la patria. And that's an indispensable feature. So if you want to have mental health, a positive attitude, human agency, in a world like this, national pride is indispensable. And someone who tries to tear away your national pride, especially in this case, where the historical record goes in the opposite direction. The historical record says, yes, Americans, be proud of your country. Be proud. No excuses. No ifs. No ands. No buts. Be proud. Hold your head up high. Be proud of the United States. We defeated Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Mussolini, Tojo. We are the indispensable country, the most powerful national state that was ever created by the wit and wisdom of man. And today, absolutely essential as the principal bulwark against the crinks. And when I say the crinks, I mean the totalitarian aggressor bloc of the failed Russian oligarch experiment with Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, the Chinese princelings who are now in power, the madman running North Korea, and of course the Islamist bloc there in Iran. Be proud of a country that can oppose them. And indeed, it should oppose them. The rest of it, well, here's what de Gaulle did. This is interesting. It's a speech in French. I'm not exactly sure when he gave the speech, but he says in the famous drama of Goethe, Faust, the devil, Mephistopheles, presents himself in the following terms. This is actually de Gaulle talking, but it was a play called Faust. It was written, a famous drama written by Goethe, and the devil is Mephistopheles, called Mephistopheles, and he presents himself in the following terms. He says, "I am the spirit who negates everything. Je suis l'esprit qui nous tue." He destroys everything. He negates everything. He denies everything because his goal is that everything that exists needs to be destroyed. In other words, it's a kind of militant nihilism where he becomes the opponent of whatever exists, and that's the essence of the devil. And then de Gaulle goes on, saying, following the advice of Mephistopheles, the unhappy Dr. Faust goes from disaster to disaster, from unhappiness to unhappiness, until his final damnation. And the conclusion of this particular passage is, Frenchman, Frenchwoman, we will not reap this process. We have to go our own path. And it is one of France that believes in France. And I think that's admirable. And I'm not sure we can find a good recent equivalent. I'm sure there are good equivalents all over the place, but we need that kind, and we should embody that kind of a spirit. In other words, de Gaulle says the idea, in the minds of many, the idea of patriotism has become scandalous. That's heretical. That's postmodernism, by the way. How dare you? How dare you, I say. So let's just ponder that, okay? So globalization, of course. We've got two factors at worst. One is postmodernism. Postmodernism says there are no heroes. There is no patriotism. Everything is tawdry. There is no truth. There are only interests. There's only domination. There's only power, and so forth. So we get the human personality denuded. This is postmodernism. It denudes it of all the superior faculties, right? There's no reason. There's no courage. There's no character. There's none of that. There's only essentially nothingness, right? Derrida, right? Everything that is written can be reduced to gibberish and meaningless nothing, right? So that's that. And that's the de Gaulle's view in a nutshell. That he rejects that. We will not reap that. I think obviously postmodernism in many ways actually comes out of Paris, comes out of the French intellectual, very influential in post-Vichy, when everything has been reduced to nothingness for people like the one who stands up against it, like de Gaulle back in 1940 and repeatedly over the years, standing up for your country. It's indispensable. So patriotism cannot be a heresy. It's not a scandal. It's not deviationism. The postmodernists would rather be victims, right? If you're a victim, then you get to complain. But if you're a patriot, well, then you have to do things, right? So this is the problem. Now, let's just look at a little bit of the recent research and see what we can find out in these terms. This is a study. I looked up national pride on the internet. One of these, it's one of these things that pops up in the Pew Research Center. 6 facts about national pride in the United States, okay? And what do we learn here? The main source of national pride, just statistically, is going to be freedom. Americans are most proud of being free. 22% of Americans say one of the reasons I'm proud of my country is it's a free country. And this is shared with the Netherlands and with Sweden and with France. But the United States stands out as the one where the freedom most frequently mentioned. And they quote an American, a 52-year-old who says he's proud of strong free speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, and general civil liberties. Now, don't look now, okay? You're very right if you're proud of that, and you are very right to be proud of that. It's essential. If then you ask Americans what makes you proud of your country, about 20%, 1 in 5 don't respond with something good. They say something bad. For example, 144, you see this on social media all the time, by the way. 144-year-old American man says, oh, there's nothing to be proud of currently. See what he's reflecting, right? He's reflecting the current regime. Another one says, I used to be very proud of the United States, but since the election of Donald Trump, I'm not proud of the United States at all. And many Democrats explicitly tie their lack of pride in the United States to the current administration and its policies. And I would say, my dear fellow Americans, this is a tragically short-sighted view. Think of the Union dead. All those soldiers in blue that died to wipe out slavery, to preserve the country, to keep government by the people and for the people. And upwards of 200,000 Black Americans. Black Americans freed from slavery. Imagine going back to the horror that they had just so recently escaped from. Going back into that absolute horror. I mean, talk about post-traumatic stress syndrome. That must have scarred their souls. But they went back and they went back to fight for their fellows and for an idea and for freedom and for America, the United States of America. Now, folks, it doesn't get any deeper. It doesn't get any more profound than that. And you have heard me say several times, and I will say it here again, thank God for the African Americans, the Black Americans, because just so often we find that they are the conscience of the country, and we desperately need them. They are not a curse. They are not an abomination. They are not untermenschen. They are not subhuman. They are a great blessing to us. They are fellow Americans, and we're fools. We're fools if we don't realize this. In a world where the opposition was Lord Palmerston and his speech, Civis Romanus Sum, which means I'm a Roman citizen. I am a citizen of the empire. That was the idea, meaning the British Empire rules the world, and that if you want to be anybody, you've got to be a citizen of that. So it's either you're going to go with Lord Palmerston and I am a Roman citizen speech, and this now is Abraham Lincoln's answer to Lord Palmerston. Government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And you're going to say, well, what, Jake? What are you doing here? You doing cliches now? Is that what you're doing? But it's real. Forget about the cliches and let go of, okay? Forget about the idea that you would abandon your country for a purely transient, ephemeral phenomenon like Donald Trump. I mean, have you seen this man? I mean, this cartoonish caricature and mockery. He even mocks the colors of America with his ill-fitting red, white, and blue suit that it looks like he got from a secondhand store like Target. How pathetic. Not actually to insult Target, but you know what I mean. How pathetic. How insulting. Have you seen his behavior? His obnoxious ways in his speech? His continual alienation of our partners and our allies? His continual embarrassing acquisitiveness? His grasping? His overreach into the Arabian Gulf even? Which is, by the way, that's what it should be called. Should be called the Arabian Gulf. It's not the Persian Gulf. It was always the Arabian Gulf. And how dare, I say how dare, the Iranians appropriate the name of the Gulf. It always was the Arabian Gulf. Look at the maps. That's another story. And his installation of the absolute worst, Bill Pulte is the one that I can think of as the most recent, replacing Tulsi Gabbard, who apparently was a Hare Krishna. And we don't have time to go into that on the show, but all I have to say is, Tulsi, supposedly you left government in order to take care of your husband who has cancer, and we wish you well. And all I have to say to you is, Tulsi, Hari Hari. Okay. And Bill Pulte is replacing him, and I actually have a clip about him up on social media. I urge you to take a look at it that talks about him. This is something that I talked about, I think, on a couple of shows, the previous shows, and it bears looking into by you. So these are the absolute worst people in the highest positions of government, and how, with his frontotemporal lobe dementia setting in, the increasing and evident loss of his bodily functions, and the kakistocratic, similarly acquisitive and grasping, lustful for access to power of people around him who support him, who make a mockery of the 25th Amendment, which should have seen him out the door a long time ago. Tell me, will you tell me what magical powers they are? What magical powers does this thief have to take your patriotism away? It's ridiculous. So take heart, will you? I mean, get a hold of yourself, for God's sakes. Right? The Union dead at Gettysburg are not affected by the ravings of Trump today, nor what they did, nor the crimes of MAGA, or anything of the sort. And those traditions are here. They're alive. They may have seemed to be hidden at different times, but they're on their way back. They're making a comeback. They're making a comeback right now. All right. So Republicans and Democrats, they stress different things when it comes to their pride, right? Republicans, about a third, love freedom. 14% love the American economy. 12% love the American people. 12% 12% love the current leaders. And all I can say is, oh my God, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. 11% international standing. They love the international standing, international affairs of the United States, leader of the free world, I guess I would say. And that's worth being. 9% the political system, talking about the things the Republicans love. 7% the United States military. All right, fine. With the Democrats or leading Democrats, 15% for freedom, 14% for the American people, 9% for diversity and multiculturalism. You didn't hear me talk about the Republicans having any percentage of that, did you? Yeah. 9% for the economy, 7% for the political system. So fine. I mean, you want to quibble about multiculturalism? It depends on what you mean by that, right? I mean, multiculturalism, the country and its institutions. Look, this is the beauty of it. They're open to virtually any loyal citizen of the United States. That's the beauty of it. And diversity, of course, it's well known. Look, if you want to have a college or a university, you'd better have a diverse student body, because this is one of the main ways that you learn. However, it does not mean that you're going to have numerous states inside the state. It does not mean that you're going to have sort of, self-contained, hermetically sealed units that have no contact with each other, and that somehow these coexist on the geographical territory. So yes, diversity, multiculturalism, fine. Although with the limits that I've said. Okay. Now, of course, on the Republican side, the current leader as well, about whom the less said is the better. Republicans and Democrats have different ways to express it. Some of them think that Trump, as one poor guy says, Trump and his cabinet, our country is no longer a laughing stock. This is what he says. Worldwide, and is now a military and economic superpower. Well, I mean, I think we had that for quite a while, going back to Roosevelt, to be sure. We're respected by the entire world. Well, no, I'm afraid not. Our country is booming once again. Well, we'll have a fact about that in just one moment. We're cracking down on crime, dealing with gangs and thugs and illegal aliens. Well, you can see, but in spite of all the ideological incrustations, when asked what makes them proud, Americans are more likely than any people in many other countries to mention their country's current leader by name. I guess one way or the other. And point 6, and this is the one that disturbs me a lot. Few Americans, only 3%, mention U.S. history as something that makes them proud of their country. Who's proud of their country? The Greeks, 37%, France, 22%, la grandeur et la dignité. And I'm for that too, by the way. Hungary, 21%, Poland, 20%. And there's a lot of glory to be had there. But once again, the Union dead, okay? For example, the Supreme Court. Lucky for us and lucky for them, because they degraded enough entirely by their own corrupt and even scandalous actions, bought and paid for, many would say, that they had enough presence of mind not to tell us that the 14th Amendment is not valid, that birthright citizenship, the use solely, is not acceptable to them. The 14th Amendment, part of the new birth of freedom, well, that's just crazy. And they didn't. They affirmed the jus soli. And had they not, that would have been trampling on the heritage of the Union dead. That's another way of saying what I was trying to argue before. They are not conservatives. They preserved it, so I can't use that argument in that particular situation. I can in many others. But in this one particular thing, I can't argue that they're not conservatives. The conservatives would, an actual conservative, would say the Union was saved by the Union Army, and that's the beginning for everything that comes thereafter. And that is the glorious heritage that we enjoy today. And it is. But no one, or hardly anyone, knows about the new birth of freedom that is embodied in the Reconstruction Amendments. So sing on, I say, the battle cry of freedom. Call out the battle cry of freedom, the battle hymn of the Republic. The Lord is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored, and into play comes the terrible swift sword that is glorious beyond all comparison. And if you don't get in touch with these things, you're not understanding. The defeat of Pickett's charge at Gettysburg is the portal to the entire modern world, with the U.S. as the principal nation state emerging before too long, not immediately, but before too long, out of the industrial boom and then various interventions. And then, of course, the Western Alliance, the North Atlantic Pact, the Pacific Alliance is coming shortly, thereafter, in about the 1940s, and the world that just about everybody alive has lived in for just about their entire lives. That is, it's more than an American century. It's the American era. And it's not ending. The aberration is going to end for sure, but not the American era, not the American epoch. And this July 4th, we need to affirm, both out loud, as I am doing on this show right now, and in our congregations, that this is the case, and that this will go on. We will go on. And that it's not the age of some tawdry politician. It's the age of American leadership. And what does leadership imply? Service, generosity. Where does it come from? Lend-Lease, equipping the British, the Free French, the Soviets, the nationalist Chinese to fight fascism. It's born out of the struggle against fascism in World War II, and then it's consolidated by the Marshall Plan, which rebuilt Europe, a kind of something that Churchill called the most generous action that any country in the world had carried out in his time. Now, I don't want to exaggerate the amounts involved, but the effect was very strong. And I maybe told you, I don't know if I've mentioned this, but there's a guy in Iceland who said, I've been thanking every American I've ever met since the 1950s that the U.S. had the generosity of the Marshall Plan. So it's just the opposite of what Trump thinks, right? It's not at all. Let's make sure those foreigners don't rip us off and euchre us and skin us alive. It's so ridiculous because leadership means service. And it's servant leadership. Not like Trump, not like these other palace courtiers, these abominable persons. I say abominable. Stephen Miller and the rest of them who infest our government offices right now with their lust and their grasping. Well, Miller's an ideologue, but their overreach, their petty little abominations of principles like racism and elitism and all the rest. National pride is indispensable. The Democrats are suffering more from postmodernism, really, than the Republicans. This is because Democrats tend to be more in touch with the university education milieu. But that's Derrida and Foucault and Levi Strauss and Baudrillard and Lyotard and the rest of them. And these characters, it goes back to Rousseau. And it's simply, do you think civilization is bad? No. Do you think that the noble savage is better? Rousseau talked about the noble savage. Do you think that the noble savage is better than the civilized modern person in Europe or the United States? Well, no. Are you crazy? I mean, where would you like to live? This is usually where you can find out where people really believe, right? Do you want to go and you want to live the life of a noble savage? Would you like to do that? You don't want to do that. I know you don't want to do that. So that's Rousseau. What's the story of Rousseau? Rousseau, exponent of the Venetian, and that means the Byzantine outlook, right? And we know what that means, don't we? The idea, not duo sunt, not the duo sunt, the there are two of Pope Gelasius announced in, what is it? Someone correct me on this if I'm wrong, 510 AD? But that the religious and the secular are fused into one emperor. Rousseau was secretary to the French ambassador to Venice for the best part of a year, when he seems to have drunk deep of the Venetian ideology, which he preached for the rest of his life. So it goes between the national will, the collective will, which apparently leaves no space for the individual, and this noble savage civilization corrupts. The more technology, the more property you have, the more government you have. This is all negative from the point of view of Rousseau. And that part comes from Michel de Montaigne, his essay on cannibalism, so-called, I know, but this is it, so-called from the 1580s or thereabouts. Now, we've just come through a period where economic globalization was imposed upon the world by finance oligarchs, technologarchs, I call them technogarchs, but technologarchs, and the people like this. And the struggle in the world today is to fight our way out of this slough of globalization and reassert the modern nation state. And you've heard me talk often about globalization and what has happened. And for that, we have to have patriotism. We have to have national pride. They're indispensable. It's like self-respect. People who don't have honor and who don't have self-respect don't realize that these are the things that you cannot live without. Whatever their existence is, I don't know, but it's not worthy of the name of actual life. So they want to be victims. They think that multiculturalism is somehow you have a diverse cast in your play that guarantees a good play. It doesn't. It's got to be the quality of what you're actually delivering, not the formal features. All right, and I see we've gone past our time here, and that is Politics by Jake for the weekend show of July 4th, 2026. And we hope you have a good weekend. We hope you have a good week, and we will see you the next time. Bye now.